This is my studio where I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to actually put into reality the thoughts and the feelings and the ideas and the concerns that I have. Some of my equipment I've had for 30, 35 years, so they're like helpmates, they're like my friends. They help me bring to life what I'm experiencing inside of myself. I usually work in a series because that way I can take an idea, I can take a concept, and I can explore it in a number of different ways until I feel like I've exhausted the idea, or I just am not passionate about it anymore, or actually sometimes I just fade out of the idea. I try to have a particular technique and combination of materials for each series that I develop. I am from a very diverse, biracial, interethnic family and extended family. I remember very keenly in the 4th grade realizing that the teacher, although she was a lovely lady and I really liked her, was very, very ignorant, didn't really tell us anything about the indentured Chinese that built the railroads, didn't tell us about kidnapped, enslaved Africans, didn't tell us about the decimation of indigenous Americans. So I very early on in my life was very clear that the society disseminates very slanted or untruthful or incomprehensive story about what this country is and who we are. The series that I developed in the early 2000s, outsourced, had to do with the fact that one day I was given a beautiful beaded bag. It was a very small beaded bag, and I wanted to go out to a party and realized that the cell phone that I had gotten was so small I could put it in this little beaded bag. And I realized that this cell phone was not made in the United States, so it gave me the idea that if I tracked the reality that I was living, which was going to a party dressed up with this bling bling beaded bag, and tracked the fabrication and gathering of the natural resources of the cell phone, I would be juxtaposing two realities that exist simultaneously. My middle-class American life and the lives of the people involved in creating the cell phone. So each piece that I created focuses on my reality, which is in full color, and I painted it with acrylic paints. And then on the surface of that, there is, in a monochromatic palette, the reality of a child who is involved in the manufacture and distribution of an item that I am utilizing. So one example of this is Chocoholic Dreams. And I want to share the dialogue with you. The upper portion of each of these images has the story of the bonded or enslaved child. I developed this series in 2005, 2006, 2007. So the young man who we're looking at in this image, his reality is presented like this. Ali was lured from his family in Mali by the promise of a bicycle to work on one of the 600,000 cocoa farms in the Ivory Coast. Cocoa is the basic ingredient in chocolate. Ali and 13 other boys, ages 9 to 13, are locked in a room 20 by 24 feet at all non-working times. Their daily food ration is a few burnt bananas. They work 7 12-hour days in the brutal sun each week, earning $13 a year. It takes 400 cocoa pods to make 1 pound of chocolate. Ali has never eaten chocolate. Now, another series that I developed that I was very excited about was Behind Each Window a Voice. And this was made possible with a grant from the Brooklyn Arts Council, in which I needed to center the project in Brooklyn. So what I ended up doing was interviewing or collecting the oral histories from 8 different neighbors of my neighborhood, Greenpoint, Brooklyn. And each of these neighbors, for some reason, was juggling 2 or 3 conflicted identities. For example, there was a young artist named Alison Spellacy who was born and raised in Ireland, but her mother was from an upper-class British family. So there was this conflicted reality between her dad, who was from a very modest, humble Irish farming family, and her mother's family. And I used the concept of house, of building, of doors and windows to try to express the fact that you walk around the neighborhood, there are people living on top of each other in apartments, next to each other in apartments. They shop at the stores together. They cross each other's paths in the street doing their errands. They get on the bus together, on the subway. They see each other in the parks. But we really don't know that much about each other. So the idea was, behind each window, if you have an opportunity to connect with your neighbors, you'll find out the extraordinary triumphs and challenges and difficulties that they're experiencing. I was very aware that when people were sharing their life stories with me, it was a very sacred interaction. There's a kind of a trust that they honored me with in sharing them. And all of the people that I listened to had very dynamic stories involving terrible anguish, and for the most part resulting in celebration and in success. Another project that I developed, which I'm very excited about, and I believe that I'll take it further to another level, was creating a group of handmade artist books that respond or reveal all 10 of our national holidays. So again, that whole question, who are we, is something that I addressed with these artist books. So I go from New Year's to Christmas and try to reveal and portray some of the lies and myths and half-truths that are widely disseminated in our American culture that doesn't appreciate or acknowledge or highlight primarily people of color, indigenous Americans, immigrants. anything that takes away from a very diluted, romantic Hollywood perception of who we are is something that I tried to thread into these books. I recently, in 2019, was able to concentrate again on the whole reality of immigration because, of course, growing up in New York, I've always lived in a very diverse reality. New York is one of the most extraordinary places where you meet and work with and socialize with and see people from almost all over the world. But unfortunately, I don't think we really understand the dynamic issues that our close neighbors and colleagues are really dealing with. So again, I was able to create these 3 panels using that idea of windows, and I have these wooden windows, and I have sort of like these faces that I hope portray a sense of anxiety or discomfort or a feeling of not being safe, not being able to be anchored, because many of the immigrants are not documented and they have to suffer very, very difficult barriers on a daily basis to try to hide from the immigration, to hide from Homeland Police, to avoid being deported. So again, I'm trying to call attention and honor people who are not devalued or not really given the appreciation that they deserve, because for the most part, this country is a country of immigrants, and they have contributed widely to every aspect of the infrastructure of our society. The most recent works in this exhibition are 2 large pieces that I developed within a series that I entitle Access and Inequities. You can have access to resources, you can have social and financial mobility if you get an education that allows you to move around society, to develop skills in a profession, but at the same time you can be murdered walking down the street. And I've been able to collect more testimonies from people of the kinds of experiences that they've had, and I'm showing in these 2 large pieces that, again, in a large urban center such as New York, we're in very physical, close proximity to people, and we really don't have very much of an idea of what they're dealing with. So that's what I'm committed to. I hope people will look at these works and try to put themselves in the reality of the information that they're engaging with in the artwork, try to see themselves in a different circumstance, try to formulate questions to respectfully ask other people so that they can learn about and become familiar with those people.